Welcome. It's great to have you here. Thank you for being here for this guided meditation and Dharma talk. My name is Jonathan Foust. Grateful you're making the time. Before we launch into our meditation and talk, our traditional thank yous, acknowledgments, first of all, to our mindful movement leader for this evening, Rita Moran, for creating such a great space for meditation and this talk, and also to Ray Manioki, our mindful dialogue leader, who offers a session after this. So if you want the full Monday night experience, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, you can join Rita Moran for Mindful Movement. That'll take you up to now, which is 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, wherein I launch into whatever I launch into. And then afterward, at about, say around 8:35, 8:40, you can join Ray for Mindful Dialogue, an opportunity to connect with like-minded people, to share about your practice, share about your observations, anything from the talk. Please feel free. Those links are on my website, on my Facebook page. Also, a thank you to Glenn Harrison, our producer, to the Insight Meditation community for sponsoring this. And just to let you know, I do have a mailing list. If you'd like to sign up, you can get a weekly reminder about this class, or there's a monthly where I share kind of a compendium on talks and I share my best photography for the month. You can sign up online for that. And finally, just to let you know, if you're a regular listener, this is the little Dana pitch. This is offered freely. Dana is the whole principle of generosity. So no one's denied access to these practices and these teachings. It's all offered free of charge. And donations help to make this thing happen. So thank you for your support and thank you for your practice. Finally, the next big thing coming up is a retreat I will be leading. I believe it's January 21st, a Sunday, on the most important thing, reflecting on the year ahead and reflecting on the year past to kind of clarify intention. It's kind of an annual retreat. It's something I do every year, and it's a really wonderful time just to kind of slow down and sense what's most important. What are you going to do? What are you not going to do to make that conscious? So all that information is on my webpage and on the IMCW webpage as well. So that being said, let us launch into a meditation. You might want to reach your arms up overhead, stretch up to the left side, the right side, let out any sounds, getting all the little wiggles out of your system. How does your body want to move? How does it want to prepare itself for settling? One thing you might do, I like to do sometimes, is to sway a little bit from side to side. And as you sway from side to side, just sense if you can find the midline, kind of that midpoint. Maybe forward and back a little bit. Can you find a place where you feel aligned? You might like to bring your shoulders forward and then roll your shoulders up toward your ears. And then roll the shoulders back. And then let the shoulders drop. You might lengthen as well through the back of the neck. Feel your chin drawn parallel to the floor. And with your eyes closed, you might just sense this attunement to the inner world, to how you are responding to each moment as it passes. Gathering your attention, you might begin to slow down your breath. Notice where you feel the breath on the inside. And explore what it means to soften and relax and let go. Softening and relaxing the muscles of your forehead. Feel your forehead smooth. You soften or relax the little muscles around your eyes. relaxing and softening the muscles of your face. Over the next few breaths, can you feel your face expressionless? Relaxing, relaxing even more. Feeling the tongue, the weight of the tongue. Feel the weight of the arms. Imagine your arms heavy as you sense down through the elbows and down through the wrists. Softening the palms and the backs of the hands. Could you relax your lower back and the belly? Feel the floor, the pelvis, and the hip joints. And sensing down the length of the legs, down through the knees, down through the ankles, the tops of the feet and the toes, and sensing now the soles of the feet and the heels. And as you sense from the inside, from the crown of the head down to the soles of the feet, is there anything right now that could relax or soften or let go? Is there anything that could relax or soften or let go even more than that? And now, as you bring your attention to an anchor or a point in the senses, perhaps where you feel the breath on the inside right now, perhaps the feeling in the palms, or the sound vibrations. How intimately can you relax right at the point of contact? And how intimately can you feel this breath, the palms, the sound vibrations? And choosing one of these focal points, or one that you're drawn to that may be different. For this next period of time, let this be your primary focus. You're aiming your attention here at the experience right at the point of contact, with breath, feeling in the palms, sounds, or an anchor that works for you. when you notice your attention has wandered, is it possible to hold that with no judgment, but to very gently escort your attention back, to re-relax, to re-arrive, to feel on the inside? And as you again relax and soften inwardly, you might sense in your own way this quality of the observer, the witness, that which is aware. And can you sense this seat of the observer? Observing without judgment, awake and aware. You might notice a sense of foreground and background. In the foreground, your anchor, your point of focus. But as you relax and relax more, sensing perhaps the background, the whole field of change. You might explore from time to time these two questions. What exactly am I aware of right now? Can I let it be? You might gently refresh your practice by exploring the following questions. How much more could I relax and soften right now? How intimately can I feel the points of contact here with my anchor? Can I sense what it means to take the seat of the witness? Is it possible to let everything be just as it is? Noting the quality of presence right now and in your own time, relaxing even more. As you're ready, you might deepen the breath. You might let your head drift a little bit to the left and to the right. Let your body move and stretch in any way that feels good. Gently beginning your transition. There's no rush. And welcome back. My father loved food. In particular, he loved meat. Pot roast, ham roast, steak, bacon, liver and onions. He loved it all. My dad was born in 1925. He was a Depression kid. He grew up in north central Pennsylvania. His mother would bake bread, and my dad and his sister, when they were little kids, would ride around town on their bikes trying to sell it. He grew up hunting and fishing and gardening, and at that time, hunting and fishing and gardening was not recreational. It was about survival. And I find that many who survived the Depression and really knew poverty from the inside out had an amazing quality of celebration around food and around abundance. And in my household, every meal was built around a big piece of meat. And my dad had a real quality of ecstatic appreciation around this. After serving in World War II and through the GI Bill, going to undergrad and graduate school, he took a professorship, and the year I was born, he and my mother bought a 73-acre farm right in the heart of the Pennsylvania Dutch country. And I think on some level, our farm appealed to his survivalist impulses. We had a big garden, we had fenced-in pastures for sheep, we had farmland for alfalfa, corn, buckwheat, and oats. And he continued to hunt in the early years. And some of my earliest memories, one of my earliest memories is sitting outside the farmhouse with my dad as he would skin and dress rabbits. I just remember how he would sort of peel off the fur like a sweater. And he continued to kind of hunt and fish, though the hunting less and less over the years. He switched over to bow hunting, more as an excuse to get out there, and as he would joke, to give the animals more of a chance. I don't think he ever got anything with a bow, but fishing was a religion for him. And as he got older, is again less about the fishing, more about being on the water. I'm getting to what I'm going to talk about here in a moment. We raised sheep. We had about anywhere from like 35 to 45 sheep, and we would butcher the male lambs, keep the females for breeding, and keep the flock going like that. And so when I was a kid, it was lots of lamb. Like, lamb again, lamb burgers. We would buy half a pig and half a cow from Harvey and Edna Dietrich, whose farm was right over the hill. And we had a meat locker in town. We remember stopping by to pick up the roast, the chops, the sausage for the week. And this was right in the heart of the Pennsylvania Dutch country. And if there was ever a meat-oriented culture, this was it. Scrapple, bacon dressing, salads, Vosnocks, shoe fly pie, apple dumplings, the whole thing. We got our eggs from Lorraine DeBryan, who had a farm nearby. We got our milk from the Sanners just up the road. Got raw milk before it was taken to get pasteurized. Good food, close to the earth, and really, really fresh. In contrast, my mother was a vegetarian, and she suffered mightily in a culture that was so oriented around meat. And to be honest, we all held her kind of in some disdain, a sense that there was something wrong with her. And I had my first little awakening here when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. We would occasionally have to take in lambs that were rejected by their mothers, and we had one lamb with a broken leg. We raised it in the house, and this little ram lamb, a male, would hung out with the dogs. And we did something you're not supposed to do when you raise animals. We gave him a name, so it was Mikey. And I remember like when the UPS truck would drive up, the truck would be surrounded by barking dogs and Mikey. And the dogs would kind of go out on patrol and doing what dogs do, and Mikey would be there right along with them. And one day Mikey was gone. Again, I was 7 or 8, and I remember asking, where's Mikey? I'm not sure what I was told, but I realized he'd been taken with some of the other male lambs for slaughter. And I remember vaguely, as I've been reflecting on this sense of loss, the sense of something was wrong. How was Mikey different than the dogs? And I'm struck now when I look back that reflex to kind of stifle that emotion. And then later, in my constant search for humor and attention around the dinner table, I remember saying, like weeks later, at dinner, saying, "Please pass Mikey," which got a lot of laughs. But when I think back about it now, how did I override that feeling of pain and loss of Mikey, who was kind of a joyful, innocent being? I was pretty acclimated to the meat scene. But when I look back, I realized there was a lot I didn't like. I hated liver. I remember filling my mouth, excusing myself, and spitting it out, or trying to feed it to the dog under the table. Venison was too gamey, organ meats. Also, I didn't really like fish. The only fish I liked was fish that didn't taste like fish. And over the years, I transitioned from a meat-oriented to a plant-oriented diet. And I'd like to share a little bit about the impetus from that shift in a few moments. I've always had this fascination with the relationship between food and health, food and vitality, food and consciousness. I lived in an ashram for many, many years, so I got to experiment in a health center with being vegetarian, being vegan, being macrobiotic, raw food, living food, Ayurvedic. So I'd like to talk here about 4 reasons I love being plant-based, as I am now a dedicated, avowed, slightly maniacal plant-based person. And the question I have for myself is it possible to talk about this without making anyone wrong or shaming anyone? Because I truly don't mean to do that. I think I'm probably the only one in my whole bloodline who's plant-based. My clan of origin are hunters, they're omnivores. I was one too. But I'd like to talk about 4 things if I can, and I have no idea how long this will go. This might be a 2-parter. First, I'd like to talk about the impact of being plant-based on my lifespan, my health span, the impact on our environment, the impact on an intention to live as cruelty-free as possible, and then the impact on what I'll call eating as a spiritual practice. And I can't remember, honestly, how long I've been 100% plant-based. And I'm very, very happy to say, not only can I survive on this dietary approach, but I'm thriving. I know not everyone can. But a couple of years ago, I decided it was time to look under the hood. I'd never gotten any medical testing at all. So I got extensive blood tests, genetic testing, a cellular methylation test, an AI-assisted CT scan. I remember talking with the doctor about the CT scan, and the CT scan was using AI. It's a new approach called a Clearly report, because AI can pick up blockages that the human eye can't see. I remember sitting, and my doctor said, "Well, here's what we've got. You've got a 4% blockage." I was like a little taken aback, and I said, "Is that a lot?" And he said, "Well, let me put it this way. We start getting concerned when it's 70%. That was good news. I'm not making any claims here. My clean heart may be genetics. But I have to say, as a long-term plant-based person, the one thing I love about it is I feel great. At my age, very little inflammation. My cellular age through methylation tests is like 15 years younger than my chronological age. I recently got a bunch of blood work done through an app called Inside Tracker, where you get blood work, you get genetic work, and they kind of give you feedback as to changes you should make. And in a way, I was disappointed because when the report came back, they didn't give me anything to work on other than getting better sleep and timing my workouts better. I was a very dedicated macrobiotic eater. And if you're not familiar with macrobiotics, it was kind of founded by someone named Michio Kushi. And it's really essentially eating what your great-grandparents would eat. That's to say, in season, organic, kind of unrefined, available like within a 40-mile radius. I'd mentioned the macrobiotic philosophy to someone. He said, wow, eating within a 40-mile radius, well, that works for me. There's a Pizza Hut just 2 miles from here. But as I got really focused on this diet, I noticed I got more and more kind of maniacal. I need to insert my standard joke here. I was macrobiotic for many years, macroneurotic for a couple more, and then fully blown macropsychotic for a couple of years more. I got very, very grim around my diet. And I remember talking with one of the elders in the ashram and kind of complaining how the food wasn't pure enough. And he looked at me and said, "What do happy people eat?" I thought about it for a moment. I said, I get it. I got to relax. There is something here about being happy and relaxing. And at the same time, there's something here about really paying attention to our experience. And when it comes to nutrition and food, it's a very interesting thing. So I feel good and I feel grateful. And you know what it's like when you eat something you know isn't good for you? I certainly do. Feeling heavy, filled with remorse, filled with self-recrimination. But there's also something about eating something that's really good for you. When you feel light and you feel bright and you feel energized. I really want to be hypersensitive about not straying into shaming. Many of us were born with imbalances. We're combating a food industry that has a lot of very, very intelligent people who are promoting foods that are very, very addictive. Very, very challenging and very interesting to look at your particular cravings and how are they related to physiological imbalances or emotional needs. When I realized at one point I was just craving lots of sweets, craving lots of carbohydrates, and realized I wasn't getting enough protein. My body was simply looking for energy. I'll put on the choke chain because there's a very interesting thing here around looking at cravings and the experience that you are looking for and what might be underneath that. Maybe we'll touch on that in a bit. But as I lived in a spiritual community, there was lots of attention on food and energy, and being raised kind of in this yogic world, there's this recommendation to really listen internally. That when you eat something, for example, there are 3 possible outcomes. One is it's going to give you energy. The second is it's going to deplete you in some way. And the third is it'll be kind of revenue neutral. So part of the mindfulness practice is to very deeply listen, stay in tune with the body, to eat just at the point of satiation. And that was a challenge for me because in my past, I thought you were supposed to eat until it hurt a little bit inside. So experimentation is really, really key here. Remember my brother telling me how his wife kind of talked him into doing the elimination diet, where over a month you you sort of drop out one thing and then drop out another. So for example, the first week you might drop out red meats. And then the second week you might drop out wheat. The third week you might drop out sugar. The fourth week you might drop out anything other than good quality oil, for example. You sort of choose which ones you want to eliminate. He told me around like week 3, he was walking down the stairs in the morning and he stopped midway on the stairs. And he just realized that he wasn't feeling the aches and pains that he had been feeling traditionally for many, many years. Later, when he came off it, he had a huge pasta dinner and told me he just felt terrible. And he identified something in his diet that leached his energy, that caused inflammation. And for him, it was a recognition that gluten did not work for him. And I think that's really key here, is to deeply, deeply listen to what feels right, what resonates for you. There's a big internet personality out there who is an advocate, a very vocal advocate of an all-meat diet. He claims that eating only meat has saved his life. And I get that. Some people might die if they don't eat meat. Some people might die if they do. It's a question of finding our own way. And I know from personal experience that undoing habits is hard, especially around comfort foods. A good number of years ago now, I've always loved the taste of beer. I never drank that much, but as a treat, I would love to have a beer in the evening, sometimes 2. My lovely wife pointed out to me, saying, you always complain about how you feel the next day, that you're kind of headachy. I immediately said, no, I don't. And I thought about it and I thought, it's true. And so I let that go. And then I would drink only socially. There are just times when it's just easier to have a drink than not. But the more I became attuned to my body, the more I realized that for me, alcohol kind of feels like a poison. And so about 5 years ago, I just stopped. It's so much easier for me. And in full disclosure, I do enjoy and savor an annual or semi-annual shot of really good tequila. For some reason, that feels good. So if there's a point here, it's about looking really closely at what you consume and then evaluating how you feel. Do you feel energized? Do you feel depleted? Do you feel neutral? What feels right for me? And there are so many people, so many traditions that will tell you exactly what you should eat and how you should eat, how you should meditate, how you should live your life. And it's so important to emphasize here, at least through this lens of Buddhist psychology, the words ascribed to the Buddha when he said, be a light unto yourself. Do not look to teachers, do not look to scripture, do not look to elders to tell you, but find what works for you and give yourself to it fully. So that's the first reason why I love a plant-based lifestyle. For me, I feel great. And there's all this research now on what's called lifespan, how you can lengthen your life, but also health span, the quality of your life. And for me, it works. So the second thing that I love about a plant-based lifestyle is really exploring my participation in the environment. A good friend of mine told me the story a while back. He was at some social function and he met this guy who looked really interesting. And he said, so what do you do? This guy said, well, I'm a retired business person, but now I speak to people about the hazards of shrimp farming. And my friend said, wow, what do you do? What's their message? And this guy said, are you sure you want to hear? Because if I tell you, you won't be eating shrimp. So a warning. If you don't want to hear this, mute it. And in about 3 minutes, you can unmute. But my friend said, I would like to know what happens. And this guy said, well, primarily in Southeast Asia, but in the third world, is corporations come into natural fishing communities and they cut out all the mangrove forests. They put in shrimp ponds and they destroy the whole natural ecosystem. And then to raise the shrimp, they use heavy antibiotics and chemicals, which leach out and pollute all the waterways. But they also displace all the traditional fishing communities. And the people who are displaced are then hired to work on the shrimp farms. And they are basically paid slave labor wages. And over time, they have to use more and more antibiotics, which develops antibiotic resistance. And as a result of the chemicals, there are residues in the shrimp that are showing up. They're less and less healthy. These commercial shrimp escape, and some of them interbreed with local shrimp, which breaks down all the biodiversity. There are issues with methane in the shrimp pools that leads to climate change and requires more chemicals, and none of this is regulated. It kills all the forms of income for the locals, and it destroys the local culture. And as my friend said, and now I don't eat shrimp. I truly don't want to wreck your enjoyment of eating shrimp. But I think it's important to just sense, how does that land for you? And it seems important for us to slow down and take stock and look at the reality of this world we're living in, of how we are stressing our environment to the breaking point. And is there anything that you or I can do to help to alleviate that stress? And for me, what I have found is not participating in that industry feels better for me. But on a much more personal note, one of the things that I love about a plant-based lifestyle has to do with this inquiry around what does it mean to be as non-cruel as I can. I grew up, again, on a farm with sheep. Again, one of my other earliest memories was having lambs in diapers running around the Christmas tree, because sometimes the ewes would reject their lambs, and quite often what we would do is sort of wrap the lamb in the placenta and present it to another mother who had lambs and hope she might take it up. But sometimes you'd have a lamb that was just rejected by all the mothers, so we would bottle feed them and kind of raise them in the house until they were big enough to return to the flock. We had about 40 sheep, lots of newborns. And because my older brother and sister went off to school, when I was about 6, it became my responsibility. My chores were to go out and feed them in the morning, feed them at night, keep track, work with the newborns. And when I think about it now, it was a tremendous amount of responsibility. And at the same time, I learned a lot about being a responsible kid and looking out for the welfare of other beings. I still had a disconnect around what happened to them after I was caring for them. But fast forward to college. I was living in the Midwest, And I wasn't that happy. This was, I think, just starting my second year in college. And there were two things I thought would really help to balance me out, kind of living in town. One was to deepen my meditation practice, get my practice really sparkly and deep. And the second was to maybe find a farm I could live on, kind of get grounded again, because I loved the farm life. And I happened to meet a former graduate of my college, a local fellow. He grew up on a farm nearby, and when he was in college, his father died. And he was able to kind of complete his degree, and then he decided to take on the farm. It also turns out he was deep into meditation. Within a few days of visiting the farm, I moved in and kind of joined forces and spent the rest of my college years and into grad school living and working on the farm. And it was magical. We were very dedicated to meditation. We're also vegetarian, but we ran 500 acres. This was a former dairy farm, and there were very, very challenging years in the Midwest trying to run a farm. And so they had gotten rid of the dairy earlier, but here were these stanchions that were there for the cows. As a way to make money, John decided to experiment going into raising pigs. And we kind of took this on as here's how we can survive. Because I had some background in raising animals, I kind of volunteered to help be part of that. So we did a bunch of research looking at humane ways to raise pigs. And one of the things at that time was, rather than putting the sows, the females, in crates, to do a European tethering system. So they had tethers, so they could move around a little bit more freely. Worked really hard, kind of researching how to do this. We converted the dairy farm into a farrowing operation where we could, kind of raise piglets. So in addition to helping run the 500 acres that we were managing, I took on the animal husbandry job. There's a lot of research how to set this up for optimally for the animals. And there's actually I imagine it's still there. There's actually a magazine called Hog Digest, which is the same size and font as Reader's Digest. It's all about this research. As you're raising animals, you don't want them to be bored or have too much inactivity because they turn on each other, but not too much space because they won't gain enough weight. So I kind of threw myself into this, and a couple times a year, we would have about 125 piglets. And I would welcome to the world. I'd clip their eye teeth. I'd spray their umbilical cords with iodine. I'd give them a shot of iron. And I focused on being a good guy, keeping the animals as happy as I could. So I'd be injecting antibiotics when a sow was ill, when they were giving birth. If they were kind of slowing down or getting fatigued, I'd give them a shot of oxytocin. Sometimes I'd have to pull pigs when the mother was tired, which was quite an experience. You have to soap up to your bicep, and then you lie next to the sow and kind of slip your arm in and feel around for little piglet noses and pull them out. Little pigs are the cutest things. Later, I also would castrate the males. And part of the reality of raising animals was, if there was scours or diarrhea in the litter, I would have to cull the sick piglets. I'd have to end their life so they wouldn't infect others. First time I saw John kind of casually kill a little piglet, I was horrified. But to be honest, it wasn't too long before I did it as casually as he did. It was part of the job, and I was wanting to do a good job. And then one day, everything changed. I was focused on doing a good job of raising these animals in as harmonious a way as I could, making them happy. The reality struck when I had to take them to market. So we would feed out the male pigs to about 220 pounds and then load them on our truck and then drive them to the slaughterhouse. I don't want to traumatize you here, but I also want to communicate something, which is the reality of what animals go through. And these animals that I had cared for, had had as happy a life as possible, were shunted onto the truck. Normally someone else would take them, but for some reason it was for me to drive them. So it was about a 50-mile drive, and as I backed up our big international harvester to the dock, then the workers at the slaughterhouse took over. And they used cattle prods, electric cattle prods. And I will never, ever forget the confusion and terror in these animals. And more than that, the most haunting thing for me, not only seeing these animals that I cared for being treated so roughly, were the sounds from inside the slaughterhouse. The absolute abject confusion and terror of these animals. This is the reality. Harvey Dietrich, our neighbor, who's an old farmer who had actually would talk to us about what it was like to farm with horses, was a very grounded, very realistic man. He knew his animals really well. He cared for them, and he would take down a cow or a pig with a quick blow to the head, done as humanely as possible. Distract the animal, knock him out, and then go about processing the food. That is not what happens for, I would guess, 99.5% of the animals now. So the question I ask myself, how much do I want to participate in this culture? To what degree do I want to support this industry? There's nothing compassionate about factory farming. And the question becomes, what is the scale at which I'm willing to participate? So for a number of years, I was plant-based, but I ate eggs. And for me, eggs were about as benign as they could get. I actually called myself a vegan. And it's cheap protein, it seems pretty clean, and it was just a guaranteed way for me to get nutrition. So to have some hard-boiled eggs and get that protein, really, really good. Now, at one point, Tara and I, we had actually experimented with eating meat for a while, and then we kind of moved off it quite a number of years ago. Then we had a rule, which was basically, let's keep the house plant-based, but outside anything goes, which pretty quickly kind of dropped away, but we were eating eggs, and then Tara kind of stopped eating eggs. And then one day she said, they actually kill all the male chicks. They're just kind of ground up for food. I remember being really irritated that she was bringing this up, and a certain degree of anger, because it was so damn inconvenient. But as I sat with it and I actually did some reading, I just thought, okay, time to let this go. Do I want to be supporting this industry? Because and we actually, Tara wrote a number of the companies, for clarification. And all of the progressive egg-laying companies have to kill their male chicks. It's just the economics of it. So the question here is, when it comes to exploring living cruelty-free, to what degree do we want to participate? You may be familiar with the Jain monks. The Jain monks are amazing, amazing practitioners. They wear a mask so they might not inadvertently kill a bug by inhaling it. They walk with a peacock feather to clear the path in case they might tread on an animal. Part of their practice is they only eat once a day what they can hold in their hands, and they can only stay in one place for 24 hours. I mean, incredibly rigorous, conscientious life. I'm not ready for that. I'm aware that even plant-based falls under the basic adage of killing and being killed as part of the nature of life. And I'm not here to tell you what to think or how to eat, but I do want to share the reality of this. The final thing I'd like to share in the time I have is another love about this, is the love of eating as a spiritual practice. Taking food as a sacrament. I remember Tara and I were leading a retreat at the Omega Institute. It was quite a few hundred people, and she asked me to lead the raisin eating meditation. If you haven't done this, it's really quite powerful. At least the first time. Everyone gets a raisin, and you're kind of holding this raisin, and you explore the visuals. You look at the raisin. You smell the raisin. You roll it between your fingers and get a tactile sense of the raisin. You reflect on the four elements of like the sun, the earth, the water, the rain, and what brought this to life. You reflect on all the hands that were part of this, the hands that planted the seed, that cultivated, that picked, that packed, the hand that gave it to you. So it was this really kind of a beautiful thing of just open to this experience. And then you take the tiniest bite of the raisin, and ideally you just take it and you feel it on your tongue, and you feel the popping sensations. And it's quite a powerful experience. But as I let it, I took one little bite of the raisin, and the raisin tasted horrible. There was something really off with that raisin. So we took sharings afterwards, which were usually like, oh, that was so, it really reframed how I eat. And people are like, God, what was wrong with that raisin? Nonetheless, eating as a spiritual practice. I love there's a scene from Last of the Mohicans when they the two brothers and their father take down a deer, and I think it's Chinyakuk offers this prayer of thanks. He says, "We are sorry to kill you, brother. Forgive us. I honor your courage, your speed, and strength." That moment of taking the life, but honoring, I think, is kind of our way through. And it's very interesting to reflect on the sacrament of food. No matter what you're eating or how you're eating, is it possible to kind of ritualize and honor that which you're eating? Our family was raised Quaker, so we had a few moments of silence before every meal, which was wonderful. And there's a practice, and I know I just have a few minutes left, but there's a very, very interesting practice. You may have heard of it, and I think it was in the 30s and 40s, called Fletcherism, which was the idea of chewing each mouthful 35 times. It's very interesting when you do that as a practice, how much you taste your food. And what I've noticed is that when I can do that, it really brings out the flavor in the food. And you also notice when it's processed food, everything kind of disappears very, very quickly, and it's kind of inherently dissatisfying. There's one particular story, I'm going to summarize this one as quick as I can. In the ashram, there's a fellow by the name of Lino Stancic who came and gave a presentation. He wrote a book called Power Eating. And he told the story of his father who had been imprisoned in World War II, or was it World War I or World War II? He was captain of a boat, and the whole crew was taken captive, and they were only given very, very meager food, like a watery broth and some stale bread from time to time. And with just a few of his closest cohorts that he were willing to kind of do this, he said, let's eat the liquids and drink the food. That is to say, so they would just sip this broth and hold it in their mouth for a long time. And then whenever there's anything solid like bread, they would chew it and liquefy it, like really like chewing like 200 times. He and his cohorts were the only ones who survived that prison camp. And later he was a political prisoner, and he kind of did the same practice. So I and others were very inspired by this. And the whole idea of like chewing each bite 200 times became a practice which I did for many months. It's very rigorous, but so interesting that you can actually feel that when you slow down, when you are really mindful of what you're taking in, you really break down the food very thoroughly. It's all pre-digested, and you really taste the food. And you taste the energy in the food. And because it's also mindfully pre-digested, the level of digestion is very, very interesting. I would notice quite often it would take forever to eat a bowl of rice and vegetables, but I would feel so satisfied at the end, so deeply satisfied. And those who engaged in this experiment in the ashram, those who needed to gain weight, gained weight. Those who their system needed to lose weight, kind of lost weight. There was a natural rebalancing that occurred. So thank you for letting me kind of indulge into this topic, because when it comes to living mindfully, for me, when I think about my transition to being plant-based, and rather than from any sense of you should, I really wanted to reflect on what is it that I love about it. The fact that I feel so good, I feel so healthy on a plant-based diet. I feel good. I love the fact that in my own small way, I'm helping to contribute to taking some of the stress off the planet. For me personally, this inquiry into living as cruelty-free as possible and backing it up with my actions has been very helpful for me. And then finally, this kind of refuge of eating as a spiritual practice, which I don't do all the time and I don't do perfectly, but to explore kind of the gratitude and the deep, deep listening. I think the greatest desire, one of the greatest desires we all have, is to live in balance and to live in integrity. And I really thank you for allowing me to share some of my journey here. I hope in some way it was helpful for you. And if there's anything I've shared that's harmful or hurtful, I apologize as well. Thank you so much. May your next meal be filled with joy and celebration and gratitude.